सरकार में है या पार्टी में है, हम सब लोगों को मौका दिया है। बाकी पार्टीज भी युवाओं की बात करती हैं, लेकिन वो ज़्यादातर लिप सर्विस होती है, क्योंकि बोलना आजकल अनिवार्य है, इसलिए युवाओं को हम आगे लाएंगे, बोलते हैं।
युवाओं को जो जिम्मेदारी दी गई है, अब हमारी जिम्मेदारी बनेगी कि उन अपेक्षाओं पर हम लोग खड़े उतरें।
Welcome back. You're with We Mean Business. Sachin Pilot enters the Ministry of Corporate Affairs at a time when there's been a raging debate on crony capitalism, on growing corporate influence in policy making, and in the aftermath of a series of scams that have been unleashed by the media and by activists. He also comes in barely days after the cabinet cleared the much-delayed Companies Bill and will now face the daunting task, in fact, of steering it through Parliament in the winter session. He's promised to bring in transparency and conduct investigations without any prejudice or bias, but at a time when the Congress is being accused of unfairness in their varying treatment of Mr. Nitin Gadkari and Mr. Robert Vadra, can one really expect any significant changes? Joining me to debate all of this and more is Mohandas Pai of Manipal Global, and then we'll also get in views from HP Ranina, corporate lawyer, and Aditi Phadnis of Business Standard. First, across to Mr. Mohandas Pai. Sir, your initial reaction to this change at the MCA, will really a young face make any real difference, you think, or will constant changes really derail the process already been set into motion by its predecessor?
Well, I think the young face will make a big difference, because you want people who are in tune with the current reality of business, what is happening on the world, because the last 20 years has seen some tremendous changes. And if you have people whose worldview is that of the 60s and 70s, then it will just not do. We need modern legislation. We need to adhere to global standards. We need young faces who understand globalization, understand how Indian businesses are growing up, the need for protecting investors, the need for a legislation that empowers business and not controls business, because I find many of the people who grew up in the 60s and 70s have a controlled mindset. So I think having younger people will definitely be a considerable improvement over the past.
So you've been active all your life in professing the importance of corporate governance. In fact, you also own a stake in one of the proxy advisories. What do you think are some of the key challenges Sachin Pilot faces if he does decide, in fact, to cleanse the system?
The key challenge that Sachin Pilot will have to face if he wants to cleanse the system is to prosecute wrongdoers. We have the best standards, we have very good companies, but there are a set of people who do not follow good practices, who misuse investors' money, and they get away scot-free. So we need a process which prosecutes them and punishes them. You've seen what happened to Rajat Gupta. In 2.5 or 3 years, Rajat Gupta was arraigned before the law, was prosecuted, and has been sentenced. How long does it take to sentence people who do not go by the law? Look at the Satyam case. Till today, we are not seeing the prosecution happen. The case is still going on. So the first thing to do to enforce the rule of law is to make sure that people who are not following the law are persecuted and who are punished. That will send a message all across. 2, very important, is to make sure that investors become activists. We have seen the institutions not even go and vote in the AGM. We have seen the institutions not even go and assert themselves when they know that the management is not doing well. We have grown up with this notion that companies are properties of certain families. They can do whatever they want with them, misuse company resources, and run it like private fiefdom. It is not acceptable at all. And for that, the institutional investors have to come and have to assert themselves. For that, we require change the law. And third, very importantly, we need a modern legislation which empowers the board much more. For instance, if there's a resolution in the AGM saying that some benefit will come to the promoter group which has a large shareholding or a dominant investor group, then their vote should not be considered, and the vote of the rest of the shareholders should be considered. In the board, for instance, when you pay compensation to people who are dominant shareholders, I think there has to be an assertion by the compensation committee that they've gone through all the norms and they find the compensation to be fit and fair. A certification has to be given, which is not there in the law. I think some small things are needed.
So, but how is all of this possible really when the integrity of the MCA itself has been questioned by the opposition at least of double standards recently when Veerappa Moili's immediate dismissal of the Vadra case while essentially swiftly acting when it came to Nitin Gadkari? How can you really be so sure that all of these things would in fact be a priority when the very integrity of the ministry has been questioned?
Well, I think Minister Veerappa Moily did wrong by rising to the defense of Robert Vadra and now becoming very activist to punish Nitin Gadkari. I think it's wrong. He's playing politics. He shouldn't have done it because he's the minister of the government and he has no business to give a certificate to a private citizen saying, I've done it and I go protest somebody. That's totally wrong. I mean, he has a right to investigate and that is his right as the minister, but he shouldn't give certificates to anybody else. I think I would take it as an aberration. It's an aberration. The credibility of the MCA is not in doubt at all. They are a good institution. They have their fair shares of bad days and good days, but they're a good institution. What happened with Veerappa Moily is an aberration. I wouldn't leave credence to the opposition charges.
But what makes you really think that Sachin Pilot would be any different, given it's not his own integrity, but the kind of pressure that would be put on him in case he decides to pursue any of these kind of cases?
Well, we have lived with hope in this country for so long, so we still have some hope left in the future of our country. And here is a young man who is coming into politics, is becoming a minister in the public gaze. He has a long career ahead of him. He has to assert his mark, make his mark, and he has to suffer the consequences of his action because there's a long career ahead of him. If you have ministers who are close to the expiry date, in a sense they've been there for a long period of time, then whatever they do, they will not suffer the consequences. They don't care. But Sachin is very young. And I do hope he does many things. For example, IFRS is required in India. The new Companies Act is required in India. Some kind of doing away with irrelevant regulations are to be done in India. And I am hopeful that he's young, he's got a modern face, he's very articulate and very, let's say, well-read. I met him several times and I think he's well-read and I find him to be the right kind of person. And he represents the face of the future, the young India, the India of young leaders who are building the India which is global. So I think all of us have great hopes on him. I do hope he doesn't belly our hopes in the future, but I think he will do his best. We support him fully.
Okay, so you're sounding very optimistic, but really last question, the company's bill should hopefully address a lot of the issues that you've been talking about. But how much can he really do given the small window he has left before the election?
Well, I think he's facing opposition. What he needs to do is that the parliamentary committee's recommendations have to be implemented substantially because that's the way democracy works. And then talk to the Prime Minister and push the bill through. There are some contentious issues in the bill which can be amended later, but we need a modern bill. We have a 1956 bill, which is a replica of the 1913 bill, and Great Britain, on whose laws we have created the 56 bill, has changed the law several times, whereas we have not changed at all. And the 1956 bill is a draconian bill. There are some 200 sections, I'm told, which are criminal liability. It's almost like a criminal procedure code. So I think he has to push it. But I think it depends on the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has to decide because you and the Prime Minister credibility is on the line. The bill doesn't pass into law. But since the parliamentary committee has given recommendation, he has to be open to that and accept most of it and push it through. I think, we are hopeful. We have been hopeful for so long and we don't want to give up hope, but I hope he does it. But at the same time, he must have a dialogue with industry across the spectrum. He must understand their concerns. He must reform the way the regulations are enforced in this country. He must make sure the MCA becomes business friendly. At the same time, it goes after people who break the law. So a change in culture is very essential. And he must make sure that there's transparency and honesty in the execution of the company's law. So I think, he requires the Prime Minister's support. So let's have hope.
All right.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.